There we go.
Okay.
I was just riding the elevator up.
Okay.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Lucas Martell, the creator of Walkabout Mini Golf.
And I'm Don Carson. I'm one of the art directors here at Walkabout Mini Golf.
Yeah, and today we're going to take you on a little tour of the latest course, Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days. This is sort of the final in the trilogy that we had announced of Jules Verne, although I definitely feel like we had so much fun. I kind of want to find another really fun Jules Verne course. Just we kind of fell in love with the freedom it gave us, and there's just something really cool about this late 1800s era. It was just a really interesting time. So yeah, we wanted to take advantage of that. And Don, for you, this is also full circle because I think your very first course was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, wasn't it?
It was. That was the first one I started working on, and almost simultaneously, I also started sketching Eiffel, which was what we were calling this early on. And a lot of it was you had a very distinct idea in your mind as to how this would work. And so we did a lot of back and forth as far as more than it just being sort of the Eiffel Tower with a Zeppelin depot on the top of it. It was all about that journey and that progression from the elevator up through the sort of rib cage of this structure up to the top. And I think we really pulled that off.
Yeah. In fact, we can start walking through as we show you around a bit. I think when people found out we were doing Around the World in 80 Days, they definitely had something in their heads that it was going to be all these kind of little vignettes. And there was just something about that to me that wasn't quite as interesting. There's a poster on the wall for Egypt, and we did an entire Egypt course. So it kind of felt like a little kind of a sampler platter wouldn't really do it. And so we opted for this course to get away from the book, and it's more sort of like people's idea of Around the World in 80 Days and capturing more of a moment in time. That's also one of the reasons that we wanted to wait for this to be the final Jules Verne course, because it feels like it's sort of capturing that era. The 1889 World's Fair was essentially the height of Jules Verne's popularity. I think he passed away not too long after that, but it felt like Paris in that era was just sort of like kind of capturing a lot of Jules Verne-ness that we associate with. I think that this is one of my favorite locations that we've done. Don, I know we went through a couple of iterations as we were coming up with the design. Do you kind of remember what some of those were?
Definitely did. And I think our courses are the most successful when there's a founding idea around it. And for us, it was playing off of modern air travel. So there's a huge amount of sort of inside jokes when it comes to everything from how you get your tickets to the security walkthrough. And then we also wanted an excuse for you to explore every part of this tower. And the way that we did that was we had this sort of grand entry into the Zeppelin blimp airport. And then almost immediately, the elevator that's supposed to take you up to the departure terminal at the top of the tower is broken. So it forces you to play your way all the way through every single department backstage that you normally wouldn't get to see if you were to visit an airport. So that was sort of the foundation of our design principles.
Airports have just always been something really kind of interesting. Like there's just something about the design of an airport, about how it has to move not just people, but there's layers of security, how the baggage goes, there's the maintenance, what do the bags actually go on to get to the plane, and like all that stuff that you don't see. And then, yeah, I think that was something that you really brought, was the tapping into the humor of like, let's just take a modern airport, but like sort of like take all the things that we would expect. I don't remember as you passed through the metal detector there if we'd even thought of like, oh, we should have some sort of like global entry or playing up those ideas. Really leaning into the humor of it. Jeremy Wynn, who's actually our art producer, took it upon himself to pretty much model the entire 1889 Paris pretty even accurately as it would have existed. So all the stuff's in the right place. You can actually fly out there, and he got some survey maps to really sort of get things in the right place. But if you fly around, it's actually pretty much a 1-to-1 scale. Arc de Triomphe is out there, the Notre Dame, Sacré-Cœur, they're all actually what you would be seeing. You know, you probably don't have to go quite as far, and then once we saw it all in, we're like, oh my god, this kind of makes the whole course. It was great as the Eiffel Tower, but the fact that you can actually see all those details out there just makes it so rich. And yeah, I'm really glad that he went as far. You can fly out there. There's nothing in particular that happens if you go out there, but like many of the other ones, like Labyrinth had something similar where you could go out and you could fully explore that maze. Nothing that needed to be in there, but it just really grounds you and makes you feel like you're in the actual place. And the other thing I'll also point out, if you look down there, is that we also created the grounds for the World's Fair, and that's especially nice when you get into that on the hard course at night. There's a couple of fun little details that we've added down there that yeah, it was just sort of a moment in time that we really wanted to capture. Even though it was technically a couple years after Around the World in 80 Days was published, it felt right.
Yeah, I think that we surprise ourselves sometimes. In the early concept sketches, I think there's notes that say, clouds obscure view of Paris, or just a slight glimpse of Paris. So I don't think our first days we knew what we were going to be producing. I think we surprised ourselves. And Jeremy put months of his time into working on this. Jeremy really, really nailed the city of Paris.
This course is definitely a more traditional course. After Meow Wolf especially, we wanted to do one that was going to be just, a little bit more sort of like grounded in the physics. However, the thing that I could see you looking at right there, we decided that if we're playing up in the Eiffel Tower, we realized at one point, I think, that all of the Jules Verne courses have been about facing some fear. I think that we definitely had fear of being submerged deep underwater. I'm forgetting the name now. Thalassophobia. We had definitely fear of getting trapped deep underground, and now we've got acrophobia a little bit. So not that we intended that originally, but we decided that if we're up on this high on the Eiffel Tower, we really wanted to play with that height and give your ball plenty of opportunity to fall to perilous depths, far below.
This is that moment where you're diverted and you're being forced to go backstage a little bit. So we wanted to play with things like the expectation that your luggage is being, really well handled and taken care of, which is something that is always a fear at airports. So we've confirmed that they're not taking any care of your luggage when you come to Port Eiffel.
Fun little gags with the suitcases, and I also want to just call out the lighting that Tony Davidson did on this one. Man, does that really, it looks good before, but this one in particular just felt like it made it so romantic as we were figuring out that, just that time of day and really giving it this sort of brilliant morning light. I think we did it in Zerzura. We had some of these sort of hanging banners, but all of the work that Ryan Sizemore, one of our tech artists, did to give them the blowing wind and those little details really go a long way to just making the whole space feel alive, even though you're not seeing anyone other than the people that you're playing with in here. So also a big shout out to Zach Alexander, who did all of the artwork that you're seeing. So all of the banners, all of the posters. He did a fantastic job of giving those that really nice sort of graphic look that still kind of harkens back to, it's not quite the Alphonse Mucha look, but it definitely sort of feels sort of like a Walkabout version of that time
little
period.
Toulouse-Lautrec influence as well.
Yeah. We also made the call, I forget how early this was decided, that we were just going to have the whole thing in French.
And also the central clock, that's sort of the central element inside here, tells your local time.
Oh yeah, that's true. The clock actually works. We realized that kind of late in the game. It's we have to make that just work. So it's a fun little detail. I think that was one of the things that you did as one of your big when you were doing an early pass, you just kind of drew a quick sketch of this really grand centerpiece sort of clock, and it just sort of stuck and went and got even bigger and more centerpiecey.
It's definitely a theme parky thing, is to create some sort of central element that other things wrap around. And so this wonderful vaulted space really needed some central focus, and the clock was perfect. The train stations tend to have them, so it seemed like a good addition.
Yeah.
So this is what our first attempt to move you out, over the city and sort of hopscotch your way from airship to airship.
I think the layout of this one definitely took a little bit longer to get, just because it is so compact, and it's very sort of like it's incredibly windy, but it all stacks sort of on top of itself in a fun and sort of like labyrinthian way. But we knew from early on that we needed a chance to get out so that you can actually feel what it's like. You feel the contrast of being inside the sort of the guts of the Eiffel Tower with all those steel girders sort of like framing everything, and then really sort of starting to get a big view out wider. This will also give you a good glimpse of some of the other fun gags. We, of course, wanted to feel like this place was a bit alive, so a lot of little details were added to just the things that are flying around. Just given it a bit of life, and sort of like, playing into that ridiculousness of like, oh yeah, of course someone would be hauling a grand piano in 1890.
Or an elephant.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it was the World's Fair. This would have been
exactly
probably
right.
the centerpiece. So
exactly right. And it's worth also calling out the work of Emma Mercado, who does a lot of the detailed set decking. She does a wonderful job of creating sort of story vignettes and charming little bits of business that, yes, you're playing through the environment, but there's wonderful little treats along the way as little stories are unfolding in the architecture and in the prop placement.
Yeah.
We've challenged ourselves, understanding that a lot of little movement adds a lot more quality and depth without a tremendous amount of cost. So the giraffes aren't like Hoggle. They're just the simple, but that and the elephant trunk and the all those things add up to this sort of rich meal that's produced.
We're now starting to really push the limits of both the hardware, but also there's been a lot of growth within the team and just sort of our processes we're figuring out. I mean, I don't know that we've really tried for several months now to actually run this on Quest 1, but we definitely, as sad as it was to lose Quest 1, I think that a lot of the courses that we're doing now and have planned, I mean, I don't know how we ever would have gotten this course to run on the Quest 1s, so we're definitely sort of like the not being constrained by that is definitely sort of yielding a much higher quality. But I also don't want to discount the work of the artists, because I think that this one is also just sort of like, miles ahead of where we've been previously. I think animation in particular is something that we've come a long way on, and even just being more open to adding more animated bits, like just the number of things that are moving in here, both from a technical standpoint, but also from, just thinking through and really sort of trying to get a better, make the scenes more alive, I feel like is something that we're really embracing.
We also really wanted to make sure that there was a lot of kinetic elements. The elevator in Bogey's Bonanza was so well received that any opportunities we have for you to ride something is always considered a nice plus. And then there's also the secondary animations, like all the ones that are sort of making a merry-go-round path around the tower, are all meant to project you out into the environment and then support this central experience, which is, obviously playing miniature golf.
Yeah. I also just want to point out one of my favorite views. This mess of kind of girders and steel that, like, it's when you're inside it, it's like virtually impossible to just understand like how it was designed or constructed. I remember that was one of the big things that we wanted to hold on to, was just all of this sort of like there's just layers of stuff, and I think that it works particularly well in VR because there's just so much depth that you get that you're not going to be seeing in the video, but it just really, really feels like, yeah, you're in this sort of like, yeah, this like the intestines of this giant metal beast a little bit we wanted to hold on to.
And that was a goal that you had specifically asked for at the very, very beginning. Our very first conversations were to be able to deliver this web of steel that we would be experiencing from so many different platforms.
The nice thing is that if you hold up your wrist to see the time, it should be lining up. So yes, you do see it moving a little bit on its own, but it syncs up with your local time. We did think a good bit about player comfort as well, especially knowing that some people are maybe a little afraid of heights. So we wanted to intentionally start you out more grounded. So that was one of the reasons as well for starting out sort of within the Eiffel Tower and giving people little opportunities to get a bit farther out. And it's not until you really get into the later holes that you start to get these, more of this real walking on gangplanks over the city.
Yeah, that's an Emma edition, I believe. With the potatoes on a stick. Yes. That's third-class seating for you.
There are some great gags, especially on the upper floor, that Don, I think you drew a lot of them, whether you modeled them yourself or not. Like, just a lot of these little vignettes really bring it to life of just, like, oh, of course someone would be out here painting, and there would be someone having a picnic, and some of the little prop work that you even came up with for those gags it's super entertaining and just breathes so much life into this space. We also kind of tried to intentionally obscure the view a little bit so that you never get like this totally unobstructed view of Paris. There's always something sort of in the way, and that allows us to sort of build and build because even before we had Paris, we knew that there were going to be glimpses down into the city, and so we wanted that to kind of like feel like it's something that sort of unfolds and reveals itself over time. But I also love how, because the layout is so labyrinthian, it's really sort of like, in a good way, disorienting. And it feels like, other than the sun position, but a few people who know Paris, they are kind of tracking the Seine. You can kind of feel which way you're going a little bit. So it's really cool that there was that much, accuracy in how he built everything.
This is also the first reveal of this upper deck up here, and you spent a good half of the course inside. So this is your first opportunity to really get that view of the top of the tower with all the airships moored to it and the city in the background.
I would also say this is probably the first view. Oh, sorry, say that one more time again.
We love Bioshock, but I can't think of any one particular gag that harkens to it.
I don't think there's any gags. I mean, I think that we were probably pulling more from the same source material, but it definitely is something that we love. In fact, I would argue that I think Bioshock is basically sort of just like, is essentially sort of Jules Verne. Like, they've got underwater, they've got the steampunk, they've got the sort of like the airship floating city in the sky. So I feel like that's probably more of a similarity of the source material than a direct reference to it. But yeah, we absolutely love all the Bioshock games. I would also say, piggybacking off of something you just said, Don, this is also the first time that you really see the tower itself too. So some people who might not know it quite as well might not even realize they're in the Eiffel Tower until this moment where you get out here and you start to get that view. So, also got to give a big shout out to Tad Catalano, who built all of the steel architecture and the entire tower, because that was a task. it's one thing to sort of like imagine a web of steel, but when you get into it, it still needs to make sense, and it still needs to feel like it architecturally all fits together. So he did a absolutely massive amount of work figuring all of that out and just making it all feel like it's this, really, really well-designed bit. Do we want to give them away, or do we want people to discover them? Because
we let them discover it. We definitely can talk about the fact that our internal reference for this particular airship was that we called it the 737, and it's the one that's filled with the most sort of modern day air travel amenities, but seen through the eyes of the 1890s.
Yeah, the fact that you've got the stacked up 2 rows, you've got the overhead bin space, you've got restrooms in the back of the plane. It's just that they don't happen to have plumbing in them. One of the other things that we had a lot of fun playing around with was the idea of class structure. As you get higher and higher, you kind of are moving up the echelons into, higher class society. So it goes from, being a bit more rugged or a bit more sort of utilitarian to having more of that refined elegance that people think of when they think of Paris. That was definitely just sort of a running gag that we kind of felt that it was a good way to progress the level, so it felt like each area that you were in was new and different, and it just gave us something to play off of. I think that, Don, this was one of my favorite little things that you put in, was the idea of like, oh, of course the first class or the premier class, of course, is getting like tea and cakes and all sorts of fancy stuff, whereas the third class just gets a potato on a stick.
That's right. The same is true over here of the gift shop, where we have the Victorian interpretation of the neck pillow, complete with little baubles that hang off the ends of them.
It's tassel adjacent, or no, that's a straight up tassel. It's not even. Yes,
we've got Sky Mall magazine available up in the news center, and also if you're going to take music with you, you're going to be bringing a gramophone.
You actually have to putt over one of those things where it accelerates your ball in a fun, very sort of unnerving way, but we opted to not do that with the player just for comfort reasons. We're crossing over 13. The people mover hole coming up is hole 14. We definitely wanted to capture that Parisian cafe vibe, so I think that this was also one of those things that initially we didn't know exactly where it was going to be, but we knew that it needed to be, we needed to have a strong sort of like that cafe vibe to really capture it. I also love that we got a pétanque game in there. It's not currently functional, but who knows, maybe that's an update that we can do down the road, because I'd love to be able to hang out on top of the Eiffel Tower and just play a little pétanque, which is, for people who don't know, it's basically like French bocce ball. This is easily one of my favorite tracks that he's done for the whole game. So, but yeah, also, you're not getting a chance to check out night mode, so that'll definitely be something to check out, because everything with Paris lit up at night and a couple of other details, really, really stunning. Shout out to Tony Davidson for doing all that awesome work on that.